Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the seventh episode of World Cup Group Talk, where today we're focused on Group F. Joining me as the special guest to focus on one of the nations in the group is Julia Belas, and we're going to be talking all things Brazil and the World Cup. Julia is a fantastic multi-platform journalist and writer covering plenty of important conversations in the women's game for The Guardian, for The Equalizer, and various big publishers of such name. Julia has also extensively covered the Brazilian women's national team, talking to the players, covering the players and everything around the team over the past decade. So Julia is certainly our person to talk about Brazil. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Today, I'm joined by Julia Belas here to talk about the Copa America reigning champions. Julia, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I woke up still thinking about the roster call-ups from yesterday. So
Yep.
yeah.
Exciting stuff. We're definitely going to get to talk a little bit about the roster. In fact, let's start off with the roster. You've got 11 players out of the 23 that are featuring in their first Senior World Cup. Head coach has come out and said that this is the mix that she specifically said this could be the mix for the winning formula, which is a very exciting statement, you could say. Any kind of surprising names that you saw in there? I guess what's the excitement looking at that 23 player squad?
When you look at the 23 players, you're really happy that you see names like Marta, like Caroline, Jay-Z, that have been so important in this last cycle of the Brazilian national team.
Mm.
But then you see two particular names that were a surprise to basically everyone. I and to Pia herself, Bárbara in the goal, the goalkeeper that has defended Brazil in the past in World Cups and Olympic Games,
Mhm.
and Monica Hickman, the defender from Madrid CFF. That were two players she hasn't called up recently in the past years. Two players that are not exactly, you know, on the young side of the
Certainly.
footballing career anymore. And two players that just weren't in the team in general. And it was okay. No one was missing them, and suddenly they appear in the World Cup roster. They'll probably be on the bench anyway. Barbara is a third goalkeeper, but still, if something happens, she'll be
Yeah.
there, and she'll be our only option, and that's
Yep.
a bit scary. She's not the most reliable goalkeeper. And in the defense as well, we've had Tainara being really well, but she was injured.
Yep.
Rafaeli just had some knee like discomfort this past few weeks, so it's kind of touch and go there.
Yeah.
So we don't know exactly how much we'll have to rely on Monica, and maybe bringing in someone younger or someone who has played with the team before recently would be a better option. But no one knows why Pia chose to go with these two names. It's the $1 million question,
Yeah.
and for now, I'm just trying to. It's hard to focus on the good part of the team when you have two such big changes, and I don't know, but we can still talk about the good parts.
Yeah, there's plenty of good parts in there, and like you mentioned, it certainly can be a bit of a concern because the goalkeeping position is sure it could be that third goalkeeper that we're talking about, but we've seen many instances where you had to rely on that third goalkeeper, and the defense has been definitely one of the big spotlights for Brazil. So bringing out these concerns is, I think, very, very valid. But let's maybe shift a little bit on the positives. You've got the Debinias absolutely on form. She's steamrolling right now in the WSL. Gabby Nonson, JC, like you mentioned in the front line, Caroline, Adriana in the midfield. It's looking really, really strong. And I think the players that we just mentioned have had a fair amount of time to really work together over the past, I think, since the last World Cup, really. How like versatile are those two lines looking for you when you look at the personnels that are present?
It's really interesting because when you look at the Brazilian national team, usually one of our biggest complaints is the fact that we don't score as many goals as we should. We have many attempts during the games. It's really annoying sometimes when you're watching the game and but Brazil are shooting, shooting, shooting. and it's not going in. And when you see these players playing their clubs, like Debbie and Caroline are among the top scorers in the NWSL,
Mhm.
Adriana scoring like really long
Shots, yeah.
like shots. And we really, our main concern is that are they going to be able to bring that to the national team? But it's a group that, and I interviewed Caroline about it a couple of weeks ago. It's a group that is so tight knit, and it's so interesting to see them reacting with each other and joking around and dancing. It's a really good vibe. Marta has said that, this is the best group in the national team that she has ever been a part of, because there's not no drama, no complaints. So they are just there having fun and enjoying themselves. And this is really nice to see, because, there's a lot of pressure into going, to a World Cup, especially when it's your first one. But these players, sure enough, have a lot to show for their work, and hopefully they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you've got that individual brilliance. It's just being able to make sure they put that together as a team brilliance. I mean, I'm really happy you bring on Marta here because she's going into her sixth World Cup. I mean, are you able to kind of shed some light on the influence that she has had on Brazil, or I guess South America youth football in general? Because a lot of the players that we also just mentioned have always come out and said that they grew up watching Marta. They wanted to be Marta, and a lot of them kind of like are big fans of Marta. Now that they're playing with her on the World Cup stage, it's a big achievement for them. It's kind of like they want to win it for her. Like how important of a role, and I mean, she has been the face of Brazilian football, following the likes of Formiga and whatnot. But she's been an icon, really.
Yeah, she is, no question, the best women's football player that we've ever had. Some people can say that Cici was also huge and she was brilliant, but I think what Marta achieved that Cici didn't was bringing Brazil into the world stage in such a powerful way. And you know when you look at Marta and you look at how she influenced every single generation that came after her, remembering that when she debuted in the Brazilian national team, she was only what, 16, 17. So it's been a while, about 20 years
20
since
years.
since her first World Cup. And she's such, from what the players say, I've never interviewed her, but from what the other players say, she's always really warm and really welcoming to the younger players. She always wants to talk to them and inspire them and make sure that she uses her voice to highlight what they are, what they need. Sometimes, even especially in women's football, when players are often disregarded, dismissed, Marta uses her voice and her power to say, no, we need this and we need to have this. And even against what FIFA or the federation
Yeah.
may you know do. And she is a powerhouse. And uh, some people were talking about, most of the complaints in Brazil were because Cristiane has been playing really well in the Brazilian Championship
Mm.
and wasn't in the roster for the past few years since the
Hmm.
Olympics. um, and when the main complaint was, if you want to experience, why not bring Cristiane instead of Barbara and Monica? But whatever. But like having Marta there, it may be questioned because she's older. She just came off an injury, and she says she's 100% fit right now, and she's been playing like
Yeah.
she's 100%
Yeah.
fit. But at the same time, she's 37 years old. Maybe it wasn't meant to be, but still, the even though she's not the, as Pia said, yes, in the call-ups, even though she's not, the what she once was, she's still one of the best, and she has an important role inside the pitch and offside the pitch as well. So it's kind of like what has been going on with Rapino. So, it's
Yeah.
changing roles and being there to, of course, play and score and scream at people sometimes. Marta has
Just
this really
sometimes.
great, yeah, Marta has this really great personality that sometimes when she's not playing, I miss it a little bit. Everyone's kind of, if you concede a goal, everyone's like kind of defeated, and you
Mhm.
have to have Marta or someone to be like, yeah, let's go, and scream at people's faces a little bit.
É querer mais, é treinar mais, é se cuidar mais, é estar pronta para jogar 90 e mais 30 minutos, quantos minutos for. É isso que eu peço para as meninas. Não vai ter uma formiga para sempre, não vai ter uma Marta para sempre, não vai ter uma Cristiane. E o futebol feminino depende de vocês para sobreviver. Então pense nisso, valorize mais. Chore no começo para sorrir no fim.
But at the same time, like her personality of the pitch to give some advice to the players, to the younger players, it's awesome, and everyone just loves her. Everyone just loves her. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a bad thing about Marta ever,
Yeah, it's
and
hard
that's
not to
saying
love
something.
her.
Yeah.
For a player who has been playing professionally for over 20 years and not to be caught in some kind of like unpleasant comment is not a very frequent thing. And sure, she might not be bringing the magic Marta that we can see sometimes in the field, but it's that attitude and that mentality that you need to bring to a side that has a lot of players that have never been in the World Cup. And I think a lot of the players that are so inspired by her. You kind of want her to be there as a daily reminder. And I guess kind of like the ideal world would be for Brazil now to kind of give her that last bit. But we kind of have to highlight that Brazil have maybe underachieved in major competition. They have won the Copa America pretty much every time except once. This time specifically was the first time they did not concede a single goal in that run, which I think is just absolutely just like a crazy stat to have. And so they're on a roll and they're hitting new heights. And talking about these previous World Cups and Olympics, they have fell short here and there. The last two World Cups have been round of 16 knockouts. Unfortunately, we're met with the hosts in 2019. What is it that could be a little bit different this time? And I think, is that an underachievement going to maybe haunt them back, or this is a newly different environment that we're hoping for here?
The hope is that it will be a different environment. The hope is that we won't, um, you know, fall into the traps of feeling defeated before we even start playing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that happens a lot with Brazilian, the men's and the women's national team. Sometimes they go into the game and they're not what they can be. And, everyone can have bad days, but you have to keep those to a minimum when you're playing a World Cup.
For sure.
And, these underachievements over the past, few World Cups and in the Olympics, it's mostly because in the 2000s, in the 90s, 2000s, when Brazil was one of the best in the world, we didn't have much, but we have like the individual talents. We
Yeah.
had the team was great, and we had many, many younger players, like Formiga, Marta,
Yeah.
just growing up, growing into football with the women's national team. So in the other teams, the other countries, they may have had some talent, they may have had some structure, but they didn't have a lot. So it was easier for Brazil to use the talent to rise above them. And after a few years, like in the 2011 World Cup, 2015 World Cup, we would see teams that were built, they would have used national teams that the players already knew each other and went to the senior national
Mm-hmm.
team already knowing better how to deal with the pressure. We would see, of course, the United States doing their own thing, but other countries also rising up to the occasion and investing a little bit more in the women's game. And you would see that reflecting on the pitch. Meanwhile, Brazil was with the same generation that
Mm-hmm.
was playing like 5 years previously with no much improvements, coaches that usually didn't know a lot about the women's game, didn't know how to address the issues that even fight for the players.
Mm-hmm.
The Brazilian women's national team now to Australia is going to the World Cup with two physical therapists, two doctors who are specialized in women's health. Um, a psychologist. It's something that we never had, not even in 2019.
Wow.
So it's kind of something that other countries have been doing for a while now, for at least 10 years, Brazil are doing now. So it's kind of hard to say that, we are one of the favorites. We
Yeah.
have results to show, but it's hard to say we are one of the favorites when you have England or when you have the US or when you have Germany. And we have a really difficult path in the
Bracket,
World
yeah.
Cup. Yeah. So it's like if we go in group stage and face France. So if we lose to France and we move through to the round of 16 in second, then we get Germany. And,
Yeah.
it doesn't get easier
Doesn't.
after that. So it's kind of like, uh, what can we realistically expect? I honestly, realistically would bet on around 16, maybe round of eight, like quarterfinals,
Mm-hmm.
um, hopefully semifinals. But the thing is, if we get past Germany, I think there will be a lot of pressure taken off from the players, and
Mm.
that may play in our favor. So, and
Yeah.
we beat them a couple of months ago. So,
You did. That was the last kind of friendly that you guys kicked off. And I actually really appreciate how Brazil have been going out after champions. Like they went to Wembley on home soil of their European champions, took them to penalties. They just love getting out with Canada, which is great because they are Olympic champions and they had a mixed bag of results. So, and they had the US as well. So Brazil are going after reigning champions, whether that be European World Cup champions and Olympic champions. And I think that lineup of games automatically gives them a ton of confidence going into the group stages, and it's because they had good results as well. And so I think the last one here, because you already kind of gave me a prediction, which I love, but what would you love to see this World Cup do, the effects you want it to have on Brazil? Because we know how big football is in Brazil, and I think we can tell by the quality of youth they put out there, whether that be young or experienced or just breaking into the game in their mid-20s, but it's always great quality. What is that last push you want to see this World Cup present to the youth?
yeah, Uh, I really hope is that this World Cup will have many girls waking up and getting excited to watch the games. I remember in the men's 2002 World Cup, it was in Korea and Japan, so we had for Brazil, it's like a 12-hour, time zone.
Mm,
And we would have to sleep in the living room to wake up to watch the games. That was so exciting. That was like building excitement. It was part of my growth as a football fan. And winning that was amazing as well. So,
yeah.
when you look at this World Cup, of course, you can claim that, oh, it's early in the morning, no one's going to wake up, no one's going to watch it, whatever. But it has the complete opposite. It can get people excited to wake up and to watch the games and to talk about it and enjoy and suffer if we have to suffer, and then be like, okay, how can we change that and inspire the change, not only having more girls playing football but also having girls just wanting to be sport journalists, just wanting to talk about the women's game. It's quite interesting to see that this year Brazil is going to send so many journalists to
Mm-hmm.
the World Cup. I'm going freelancing, but a lot of people are going through their jobs, and that's something that didn't happen a lot even in
Mm-hmm.
2019. So it's really cool to see that changing already. There will be a lot of visibility for the women's national team, and I really hope that even if they lose, which I hope they don't,
Yeah.
but even if they do, um you know they will be able to say we did our best, we inspired people, and people will be able to recognize that.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the ways you can tell if a nation is really interested in inspiring is by the amount of the media they send. Like speaking here from Canada specifically, like I can probably name probably just 10 people that are going out here, which is not what you want to see. But compared to Brazil, it's great that they're sending a huge crowd in there, and kind of leads perfectly into my next request here. You're going to be there front and center in not in Brazil, in Australia and New Zealand, hopefully for a very long time. And hopefully, a long time means you get to see them in the final. You're going to be doing a lot of coverage, a lot of writing. How can people follow up on everything and keep up with the brilliant coverage that we'll be getting on Brazil?
That's about the other $100 million question.
Yeah.
I'll be freelancing, so I'll be writing for The Guardian as I've been doing for the past year or so,
Mhm.
and for a few Brazilian websites. So I think the easiest way to follow everything is to follow me on social media because I'll try to keep updating that as much as I can to, just show people how fun it is to be in the World Cup. I've
Yeah.
never been to Australia as well. I'm not going to New Zealand,
Right.
unfortunately, but at least it's nice to see a different country.
For
It's a
sure.
place that I've never thought I'd visit, honestly. So it's kind of exciting to see, the recommendations for tourists and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Kind of sad because during a World Cup you don't have a lot of free time. You have to
Yeah.
be going and following the team and everything, but hopefully it will be a nice trip overall.
I hope so. Yeah, a lot of positive things I've heard on Australia, and certainly a lot of spots to visit. But I'll be leaving all links to Julia down below on her Twitter. There's some really cool interviews that she's alluded to the players, which I'll also be leaving down below because I've read them and they're honestly quite fantastic. So everything to Julia's coverage will be down below. She's going to be your go-to person for Brazil. Julia, really appreciate you joining me here today, and I'll be heavily rooting for Brazil here.
I'd really love to. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, that was all things Julia and Brazil for you. Certainly could be a World Cup that turns out to be a World Cup that the nation of Brazil can certainly cherish, and the name of Marta can be forever engraved in. Joined in Group F are France, Jamaica, and debuters Panama. Starting off with France, I would be lying if I'm not out here saying that I'm super excited to see a completely different French team, a team that reportedly is not in a toxic environment anymore. They've got rid of a little virus that was ruining any kind of potential that the players and the team could have, and it looks like we're starting off very, very fresh with Harvey Renard here. Former head coach Corinne Diacre was removed earlier this year after it was kind of the tipping toe point for some of the players after she had been reportedly allowed abuse and a toxic environment to take place in the locker room, had excluded a lot of players for personal situations from coming up to the national team with the likes of Le Sommer and Henry, some legendary names that she kept out of major competitions, most recently the Euros of last year, has also historically underachieved in the World Cup, in the Olympics, in the Euros, pretty much every single major competition that they went under her. However, we're not going to be talking about Diacre because that is long overgone. I've made a very detailed video about the Diacre situation and the FFF Federation. I'll leave a link down below if you're interested to know how that played out. But let's talk about the big man who has taken this position now. Javier Renard was appointed in April of this year, and he comes into this World Cup as the only manager that is going to play 2 World Cups in the same year. So he was actually the Saudi Arabia head coach in the 2022 Men's World Cup in Qatar, and now he's managing the French, taking them to the New Zealand World Cup. I think it's pretty freaking cool how a manager can do 2 World Cups with 2 different completely nations in the space of 10 months. That is pretty cool. Since he's come in, he's changed the coaching staff, almost making it triple the size of what it was under Diacre. He's also made some switches in the medical team, wanting to assure a step up in how fit the players can be and the well-being of the players that are working under him. He's reportedly had various positive conversations with pretty much every single player, especially players that weren't getting called up and are getting called up, and vice versa, players that were absolutely adored by Diacre on basis of not performance, but basis of just Diacre wanted to have them in there, that are now being removed purely because they just are not good enough for the team. He's also addressed that with those players, and so he's come in and he's not really shied away from the challenges. Clearly, it was an understaffed team. It was a team that didn't have the medical attention that it exactly needed. He's addressed that. He's put in the players, and it's almost like within 3 weeks of being appointed, he had fixed and he had put a lot of band-aids on a team that had been hurting for quite some time now. They had 2 games under him, 2 wins, one over Colombia and one over Canada earlier this year, and they looked pretty bright. And if you want to understand Harvey Renard's exact play and his expectations and resume and kind of his entire career that's led up to this point, I made an entire video of what this appointment looks like, which I'll leave a link down below. So if you're interested in Harvey Renard and his tactical mind, certainly check that out because it is quite it's quite intriguing, and it's quite interesting to see how the Federation made this appointment and why I think this was actually a very spot on and drilled appointment. In a nutshell, he loves to play a 4-3-3. He's all about speed. He's all about having that possession in the midfield, and the midfield is really where he's going to shine, and why I think there's certain players that are specifically going to shine under him, with the likes of Taletti. Taletti is a player that I also focused on in the video talking about Harvey Renard, but the qualities that Renard has in the midfield are so diverse and so different. So you've got the likes of Le Sommer, Henry, Kanzidali, Taletti, who I think is going to be a player that's going to shine under him. Wasn't really previously valued at all under Diacra, but his mentality is all about pressing really high, speed, pressure, which was consistently seen in every single team that he's managed. It was what he struggled with, was keeping that consistency and keeping that pressure across the 90 minutes. And I don't actually think that was down to him. I think it was down to the quality of the players that he was managing. I'm very confidently going to say that the quality and the players that he has right now in the French team are probably a few steps ahead and a few steps better, just out of raw talent and skills, than the Saudi Arabian team that he was managing a few months back. And I will say that wholeheartedly, 100% believe that. So he has a much better set of players to work with, and it's now down to him to be able to get his philosophy through to the players on the pitch, which in a retrospect, he's not actually working with a lot of time. This is happening in a very, very short span of time. We've already got the squad out. Obviously, you've got Delphine Cascarino and Katoto missing out with an injury. Really, really disappointing to have the profile of players, of attacking players especially, that would have fit in so well into his system this early on. Amandine Henry also back after being out the last 3 years. Salma Basha, Cascarino, Kerchawi are in. Yves Perisset, Feller, Diani, Beisho, Mateo, a set of players that, again, necessarily we didn't really see under Diacra. Obviously, Baltimore being out, Hamraoui not included. Those were absolutely adored under Diacra. So we're certainly seeing a different set of players. One, because of just we're actually finally getting players that have been performing on form and have been doing well, and players that are out with injury, the likes of Katoto and Cascarino, which are going to be big misses. Generally, it's really hard to look at footage and be like, yeah, this is exactly what we're going to see from France. I can almost assume and expect, but it's really, really hard to say, yes, this is exactly how France is going to come out, because we really haven't seen much of France under him. They've been working very silently behind closed doors, kind of keeping everything on the hush-hush, and kind of also going just under the radar. Like, when people are talking about the conversation of who could win the World Cup, nobody's really talking about France, which I don't think they could win the World Cup purely because we just haven't seen enough. But this whole kind of work in silence and just do the storm on the field, which I'm pleased to see, because this team is usually one that's just swamped with drama and controversy before and after and during every single competition. So I'm really appreciating the calm vibes I'm getting out of the camp this time. For France, obviously their biggest game in the group is going to be Brazil. I feel like they will breeze through the other two teams quite easily, but it will certainly be between them and Brazil to see who tops the group. Moving on to Jamaica, who's unfortunately just has had an absolute nightmare this past month, having to set up a GoFundMe after the Federation has announced that there's certain resources that they cannot provide for the players, resources and money that if they're not there, the players cannot physically get to the World Cup, and they cannot have a camp be moved from Jamaica to Australia, which is just absolutely horrendous from a federation. What bothers me even more is that this federation, since Jamaica qualified for the World Cup, have been talking about how much funding they want to put in, how much programs they want to expand and plan for, the amount of money that they're prepared to put into the team that is going to go to the World Cup in terms of camp preparation, friendly organization, basic resources that the players would need. And they'd been talking about it, and closer to the World Cup, it was like, oh, we're kind of struggling with the finances. And now all of a sudden they can't fund these basic travels to the World Cup, and the players have spoken up and had to set up a GoFundMe. This is happening weeks out from the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. And the Jamaican women's national team has not had it easy. They were disbanded back in 2004 after they failed to qualify for the 2003 Women's World Cup. They also failed to qualify for the 2008 Olympics. In 2010, so just 13 years ago, the team was ranked 128 on the FIFA rankings. The federation had cut any kind of program for the national teams and the Olympic sides, both for the men and the women, and they actually were taken off the rankings for a little bit and taken off the global ladder because of inactivity, because the federation simply couldn't put any games together. Like, this team has been through so much of disabandonment in the 2000s to having programs cut a few years later after getting a few players in together. It was only in 2014 that the national side, honestly, I would say, rose from the ashes. The federation, I wouldn't call it funding, give them a little bit of pocket change where they were able to recruit a few players and go to the CONCACAF championship that year. Luckily, those pennies started to come in a little bit because the federation realized they actually have a very, very talented set of players that are being developed pretty much all across the world, actually. 2018 in the CONCACAF Championship, they sealed that third spot, and with how the World Cup editions had changed, they had qualified for the World Cup, and they were actually the first ever Caribbean participants in the World Cup. Like, I think now obviously they come in joined with Caribbean neighbors Haiti, but a nation that was disbanded and had to go through so many struggles in terms of funding. Being the first ever Caribbean nation to go to the World Cup is something that is truly, honestly, you just have to sit and wonder about it, because it honestly leaves me speechless. I can't find my words for this one. They're currently working under Donaldson, and this is his second spell with the team. He had that crucial win over Costa Rica. Usually loves to operate a 4-3-3, a 4-2-3-1, sometimes a 4-5-1, depending on opposition. Usually that kind of is the style of play that you would see against the likes of Canada or the US, where, you're going to be going through a lot of attacking barrage and you can catch them on a counterattack. You think counterattack in Jamaica, you definitely think Bunny Shaw, because, one of the most talented players in the squad. And this squad is actually pretty talented when we really jump into it. Even though it's been a mixed bag of results, they've got the likes of 4 wins, 8 defeats. Not terrible, but looking at the opposition, there's certainly some teams that they could have edged. Bunny Shaw had to miss a few games in the CONCACAF because of injury, but in a general sense, those defeats were pretty close in terms of, like, it was a 1-goal interval, and the victories have all been clean sheets. So definitely mixed bag of results, but let's take a closer look at the players that they have here. Khadija Shaw, goal scorer, legend, brutal, punisher, leader. I mean, you can go on and go on, because she is arguably one of the most influential and best Caribbean players in the current game right now. She has been absolutely tearing it up at Manchester City, specifically the season after Ellen White kind of made out way for her. She leads that team with so much confidence and personality and character and appreciation for what they're able to do for the youth girls in Jamaica. Jodie Brown, another player that has been so impressive. I have been watching her since her time in collegiate soccer, and she's been so good. She made her international debut in 2018. She was only 16 at that age. You've also got the likes of experienced player like Spencer in the middle, and so for them, their roster is actually a really good roster. And I hate to think about this, because I've thought about this of, like, what if they haven't been mistreated for this long, and what if the federation had actually trusted the set of players that they have? Because, man, you can have multiple Bunny Shaws on that team, and you can have it riles me up, I tell you what. This is their second World Cup appearance. Their first one was back in 2019. They left back home winless with no wins. So really, for a team who still hasn't won a game in the World Cup, that would kind of be the goal for them. Really, given just the whole situation of the federation and the players, I think at this point, I wouldn't even be so worried about what we're going to see on the pitch, but rather what we need to see happen off the pitch. Without off the pitch funding and without off the pitch support, you can't have on the pitch. Well, honestly, in the women's game, at this point, off the pitch support doesn't even matter, because you see some of these teams that are being shoved under the bus by their federations and still able to perform. But for Jamaica, it's been really disappointing just seeing that they have to set up a GoFundMe by the players. And, the Reggae girls, you love them, but it's distraction to them, and they're able to put some good performances because they're a really good side, and they're a Caribbean team that is feared by many CONCACAF nations. Watching the CONCACAF from a Canadian perspective, they are always a threat. In fact, Canada and Jamaica have to go up against each other for next year's Olympics qualifications. So they're a team that are certainly not an easy one to take against, and I just hope what's going on with the federation is not so much of a distraction. Lastly, we've got Panama, who are making their World Cup debut. Certainly a nation that is enjoying the expanded nature of the World Cup. They won all 4 of their matches in the 2022 CONCACAF against Barbados, Belarus, El Salvador, some pretty big names that they actually have never beaten before. So certainly it was a good start that 2022 CONCACAF year. They finished 3rd in their group behind Canada and Costa Rica. Since coming in, Quintana has built a much stronger backline in terms of players are able to position themselves much better than we had seen before. That was on display in the CONCACAF. They're also able to put link-up play together in the midfield, something that I don't ever recall seeing from Panama. Once you have that link-up play and once you have a relatively solid backline, they're able to get some forward movement, forward attacks, a little bit more creativity, and link up with the players that they have up on the quality front line, which ultimately kind of caused them to win all those 4 games in the qualification stages before the group stages in the CONCACAF. Marta Cox, let's talk about her. I mean, she made her first senior cap at 14. Who does that? You've got to be some really raw special talent to do that at the age of 14. She's 25 now, and that midfielder is really almost viewed as a veteran. She's got that leadership role. She's so experienced, works along with Captain Natalia Millis, obviously, who is a very important component in Quintana's lineup. Both players are almost undroppable. Marta Cox has certainly not had a very easy time to get to the position that she has. It has been a journey of up and low, but now that she's finally enjoying her football again, she's being relied on as one of the leaders in the international side. Marta Cox is going to be a player you need to keep an eye out in that Panamanian midfield. Panamanian. I don't think that's the right word. Panamanian. Another player that you also have to watch is Riley Tanner, who has kind of been on a very fast rise in some ways. She was invited to attend a training camp in December of last year, somehow managed to get herself in because she's got really good attributes. She adapted into the squad like she's almost been playing there for 10 years. Her physical strength, her versatility, she's so effective in the midfield, can even play up front. She's come in a very big surprise to the fans, myself, even to the staff. You can tell she was invited of like, right, there's a bit of potential there, and all of a sudden she's an undroppable player. Like, she's so fast and she's so strong and she's so creative, and her versatility from either being dropped into the midfield or forward line, like sometimes I'm like, I don't know if she's playing as a 9, as a winger, as a 10. She's all over. Her teammates call her frozen because she's apparently got ice in her veins, and honestly, I believe them. She is something special. She only made her international debut in the second half of the semi-final in one of the playoffs, but she was picking the ball up in the right channel, impressively dribbling past various opponents and just calmly slotting that ball in the back of the net. It was an important victory, obviously, that took Panama to the final stages of the playoffs, and really Tanner is going to be a player that a lot of people should be watching already in the NWSL. She joined the Washington Spirit. She was the first ever Panamanian player to play in the NWSL. Again, I'm not sure if Panamanian is the right word, but Tanner was the first Panamanian player to do so in the NWSL. She's only 23, playing for the Washington Spirit. If you're not already watching her in the US, you're definitely going to be watching her for Group F now. For Panama, they certainly have to enjoy the fact that they've gone to this point. It was not an easy road for qualifications, and ending up in the same group as Canada and the CONCACAF usually doesn't mean you go through. Like, historically, statistically, it's kind of like a curse, but that could be another video. But that was all things Group F. I'd love to hear your opinions on this. What did you think of Julia joining me and talking about all things Brazil? I will be leaving all her links down below. Certainly really, really brilliant coverage, and because a lot of it is in English, you don't have that language barrier between yourself and understanding these Brazilian players, because a lot of them come from really humble roots and a lot of them are still humbled to that. And I know we touched on Marta, but the way she's affected all of them is honestly it's so wholesome to see. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, and everything around this episode, the teams featured, everything we chatted about. Let me know. There's plenty of discussions to take place. There's one more episode to go. Episode 8, the last group. So to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.